Sometimes, the hardest part of chasing a dream isn't the work, it's convincing people that you deserve to be there. When I stepped through the gates of the regional academy, I was carrying one small suitcase, my father's journal, and enough hope to last a lifetime. I thought that would be enough. I was wrong. The campus was unlike anything I had ever seen. Red brick buildings stretched across beautifully kept gardens. Students hurried between classrooms wearing expensive coats and polished shoes. Some arrived in shiny automobiles driven by their parents. Others laughed loudly, as if they'd known each other forever. I stood quietly near the entrance, feeling smaller with every passing second. I looked down at my own clothes, my faded brown coat, my worn leather shoes, the same suitcase father had repaired twice. For the first time, I wished I looked like everyone else. A cheerful woman approached me. "Good morning. You must be Eleanor Brooks." I smiled nervously. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Mrs. Collins, the admissions counselor. We've been expecting you." Her kindness reminded me of Mother. For a moment, I felt a little less alone. She walked me across the campus, pointing toward the library, the science hall, the music building, the dormitories. Everything looked enormous. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked completely out of place for a farm girl like me. As we entered the main classroom, the conversation suddenly became quieter. Dozens of students looked up. Some smiled politely. Others simply stared. Mrs. Collins introduced me. "Class, this is Eleanor Brooks. She earned one of this year's highest scholarship scores. I hope you'll make her feel welcome." I quietly walked toward an empty desk. Before I could sit down, a voice behind me whispered loudly, "Scholarship student?" Another student laughed. "So that's why she's wearing that old coat." A few others joined in. Their laughter echoed across the room. I pretended not to hear, but every word landed heavily on my heart. I remembered Father's advice. People can judge your clothes, only you decide your character. So I sat down, opened my notebook, and remained silent. During lunch, I carried my small homemade sandwich outside. Most students gathered in the dining hall. I couldn't afford the meals they served there. Instead, I found a quiet bench beneath a large maple tree. The breeze reminded me of home. For a few peaceful minutes, I forgot where I was. Then, 3 students approached. A tall boy named Michael, a fashionable girl named Victoria, and another girl named Claire. Victoria looked directly at my lunch. "Did you actually bring food from home?" Michael laughed. "My dog eats better than that." Claire folded her arms. "I guess scholarships don't pay for lunch." The 3 of them laughed together. I quietly wrapped my sandwich back up. I wasn't embarrassed because of the food. I was embarrassed because I suddenly missed Mother. She had woken up before sunrise just to make that sandwich for me. Those cruel words didn't insult me. They insulted her love. Just then, another student walked over, a quiet young man carrying several books. His name was Benjamin Carter. Without saying a word, he sat beside me, opened his lunchbox, and broke his apple in half. He handed one piece to me. "You look like you could use a friend." I smiled for the first time that day. "Thank you." Victoria rolled her eyes. "So now there are 2 scholarship kids." Benjamin calmly looked at her. "No, there are 2 decent human beings." The courtyard became completely silent. Victoria scoffed before walking away with the others. That afternoon, our history teacher entered the classroom. His name was Professor Samuel Whitmore. He was respected throughout the entire academy. Without opening a textbook, he wrote one question on the blackboard: "What defines true success?" The classroom immediately filled with raised hands. Money, power, influence, winning. Every answer sounded confident. Professor Whitmore nodded politely. Then his eyes turned toward me. "Miss Brooks, what do you think?" Every student looked in my direction. I slowly stood. My hands were shaking. Then I remembered Father's journal. I opened it carefully, read the first sentence he had ever written, and answered quietly, "Success means very little if you lose yourself on the way to it." The classroom fell silent. Professor Whitmore smiled. "A remarkable answer. Did you invent it?" I gently closed the journal. "No, sir. My father did." For the first time since arriving, no one laughed. No one whispered. Instead, the entire room looked at me differently, but not everyone was impressed as class ended. Victoria stopped beside my desk. She leaned down, smiled coldly, and whispered, "Let's see how long that confidence lasts." I didn't know it yet, but she was already planning something. Something that would test not only my intelligence but my honesty. And that, my dear grandchildren, is where the next chapter begins. There is one lesson life taught me early. Not everyone who smiles at you wants you to succeed. Sometimes the people who clap the loudest are secretly waiting for you to fail. I was about to learn that lesson, the hard way. The following Monday, Professor Whitmore made an announcement. Class, next Friday we'll hold the Academy Academic Challenge. The winner will receive a full leadership scholarship and represent the regional academy at the State Education Conference. The classroom erupted with excitement. For students from wealthy families, it was another achievement. For me, it was everything. Winning meant one less financial burden for my parents. One more reason to prove Father's sacrifice had been worth it. That afternoon, I spent hours in the library. While most students returned home, I stayed behind reading history books, practicing essays, and reviewing old examination papers. Benjamin found me sitting alone. "You've been here since lunch." I smiled. "I still have 3 chapters left." He laughed. "You remind me of someone." "Who?" "My grandfather. He always said, 'Hard work is the only thing nobody can steal.' His words reminded me of Father." I smiled again. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." Across the room, Victoria watched us. She whispered something to Michael. Both of them glanced toward me, then quietly walked away. At the time, I thought nothing of it. I wish I had. The morning of the competition finally arrived. The Academy auditorium was filled with students, teachers, parents, even local newspaper reporters. Professor Whitmore welcomed everyone. "The purpose of education is not to prove who's better, but to discover who you're becoming." His words filled me with hope. The written examination began. The room became completely silent. Pens moved across paper. Pages turned. Time seemed to disappear. Every question felt familiar. Father's journal had taught me discipline. Mother had taught me patience. Both lessons carried me through every answer. When the exam ended, students slowly left the auditorium. I packed my notebook, placed Father's journal inside my bag, and walked toward the door. Suddenly, Professor Whitmore called my name. "Miss Brooks, would you stay for a moment?" My heart skipped. Had I made a mistake? As the room emptied, Professor Whitmore held up a folded piece of paper. "Would you explain this?" I stared at it. I've never seen it before. He unfolded the page. It contained handwritten answers, nearly identical to the examination questions. My stomach dropped. "I don't understand." Professor Whitmore looked disappointed. "This was found beneath your desk." The room spun around me. "I didn't put it there." Before I could say anything else, Victoria spoke from the doorway. "I saw her looking under the desk during the exam." Michael nodded. "So did I." Claire quietly added, "I thought it looked suspicious." 3 voices, all saying the same thing. Suddenly, everyone was looking at me, not as the scholarship girl, but as the girl who had cheated. Professor Whitmore sighed. "Miss Brooks, until we investigate, I'm afraid you're suspended from today's competition." Those words hit me harder than anything I had ever experienced. Not because I lost the contest, because someone had questioned my honesty, the one thing Father valued above everything else. I slowly gathered my belongings. Students whispered as I walked through the hallway. "She cheated. I knew she didn't belong here. Scholarships aren't always earned." Every sentence felt heavier than the last. For the first time since leaving home, I wanted to run back to our farmhouse. Hide in Father's workshop. Forget this place had ever existed. Outside, I sat alone beneath the same maple tree where I had eaten lunch on my first day. Tears rolled silently down my face. Then, someone sat beside me. Benjamin. He didn't ask questions. He simply handed me a clean handkerchief. "I know you didn't do it." I looked at him. "How?" He smiled. "Because honest people don't panic. They tell the truth. And you've done nothing else since you arrived." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Benjamin looked toward the academy building. "I noticed something during the exam." "What?" "When everyone stood up to hand in their papers. Victoria walked back toward your desk." My heart stopped. "You saw that?" He nodded. I didn't understand why. Until now. At that exact moment, Professor Whitmore stepped outside. "Eleanor, I've just received some information." His face was serious, but different, not disappointed. Concerned. "What information?" He held up a small brass key. "Our janitor found this beside your desk." I frowned. "What is it?" Professor Whitmore answered quietly. "It's the key to the faculty filing cabinet." The same cabinet where this morning's examination papers were kept. Benjamin and I looked at each other. Neither of us understood. Then Professor Whitmore said the words that changed everything. "The cabinet wasn't forced open. Whoever stole the questions already had access, which means the person responsible may not be a student at all." At that moment, I realized The mystery had become much bigger than anyone imagined, and someone inside the academy was hiding the truth. One false accusation can destroy a reputation in a single day. But the truth has a strange way of finding its own voice. I just didn't know how much it would cost before it did. The following morning, Professor Whitmore asked me to meet him in his office. When I arrived, Benjamin was already there. So was the academy principal, Mrs. Evelyn Parker. She welcomed us inside. Eleanor, we're reopening the investigation. My heart raced. Does that mean, Professor Whitmore nodded, something important? Mrs. Parker placed a folder on the desk. Our maintenance supervisor checked every hallway after the examination. He found something unusual. She removed several photographs. They were taken by the school's security camera. I stared at them. The first showed students leaving the classroom. The second showed Victoria walking back inside after everyone else had left. My hands began to shake. Benjamin quietly smiled. I told you. You never went back. Professor Whitmore folded his hands. The camera doesn't show what happened inside, but it proves one thing. Victoria entered the room alone. Later that afternoon, Victoria was called into the principal's office. Michael and Claire waited nervously outside. For nearly an hour, no one came out. The hallway felt silent. Finally, the office door opened. Victoria stepped out. Her confident smile was gone. She looked frightened. Mrs. Parker gathered the entire senior class in the auditorium. Every student took a seat. Teachers lined the walls. Professor Whitmore walked onto the stage. His voice was calm, but firm. Yesterday, one of our students was falsely accused. We now know the accusation was based on misleading statements. The room became completely silent. Mrs. Parker continued. Our investigation found that Eleanor Brooks did not cheat. The evidence against her was planted. Whispers spread through the auditorium. Students looked toward me. Some lowered their eyes. Others looked shocked. Victoria slowly stood. I'm sorry. No one spoke. She looked directly at me. I was jealous. You came here on a scholarship. You answered every question. The teachers respected you, I thought. If people believed you cheated, they'd stop admiring you. For a long moment, the entire auditorium waited for my response. I could have embarrassed her. I could have demanded punishment. I could have reminded everyone how much she had hurt me. Instead, I remembered Father's journal. Character is revealed when you finally have the power to hurt someone back. I stood slowly, looked at Victoria, and quietly said, I accept your apology. The room became completely silent. Victoria looked stunned. So, you forgive me? I smiled gently. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened, but it keeps bitterness from becoming part of who I am. Professor Whitmore looked at me proudly. I've taught thousands of students, but today, you taught all of us. The auditorium erupted into applause. Even students who had ignored me before stood to their feet. Benjamin smiled from the front row. Mother's words echoed in my heart. Kindness always leaves a mark. She had been right. A week later, the results of the academic challenge were announced. Professor Whitmore stepped onto the stage. This year's winner, he paused, Eleanor Brooks. The auditorium filled with applause once again. I walked slowly to the front. Professor Whitmore handed me the medal, then quietly whispered, Your father would be proud. Tears filled my eyes. He was right. That evening, I wrote a long letter home. I told Mother about the competition. I told Father about the applause. I told Daniel about Benjamin, the first real friend I had made since leaving home. Days later, a reply arrived. I opened Father's letter with trembling hands. Inside, he had written only one sentence. I was never proud because you won. I was proud because you stayed honest when it would have been easier not to. I read those words over and over again. They became one of the greatest lessons of my life. Months passed. School became easier. I earned the respect of my classmates. Even Victoria slowly changed. Sometimes, people don't become better because they're punished. Sometimes, they become better because someone showed them grace. I believed life was finally settling down. I believed the hardest days were behind me. Then one rainy afternoon, the academy secretary entered my classroom. Eleanor Brooks, there's a telephone call for you. I hurried to the office, my heart pounding. Telephone calls from home were rare. I lifted the receiver. Hello? For several seconds, no one spoke. Then I heard Mother's trembling voice. Eleanor, you need to come home. My heart stopped. What happened? Mother tried to speak, but she was crying too hard. Finally, she whispered words. That changed everything. It's your father. The phone slipped from my hand. The room began to spin. At that moment, I didn't know whether father was alive, or whether I was about to lose the man who had taught me everything, and that, my dear grandchildren, is where our next chapter begins.